All right. Hello, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started today. Thanks for coming to our first technical session of the Society year. My name is Kathleen Ellis. I'm our chapter president this year, so welcome. We have a great speaker here today with us, Luke Leung. Sorry for any mispronunciations there. I did want to mention we do have another technical session scheduled for October, the week of October 19th. That is going to be a virtual session. And there'll be more information coming out about that. So our speaker today, Luke Leung, is the Director of Sustainable Engineering Studio for Skidmore, Owens and Merrill LLP. He is the incoming chair of the ASHRAE Environmental Health Committee, team lead for the ASHRAE Epidemic Task Force for Commercial Buildings, group leader for LCA and embodied carbon, and the ASHRAE Decarbonization Task Force. He's worked on buildings including Burj Khalifa, the world's current tallest man-made structure. So welcome, Luke.
Hey, thank you for the invitation. I think if you are like me for the last 1.5 or so years, I'm at home, so this is the first time I actually travel for work. So this is interesting, and I really enjoy the hybrid. For those who are online, you don't know what you are missing here. There's food, there's people. We're actually seeing people in real life. Amazing. So, okay, hold on a second here. Okay, so the topic here today is really about healthy built environment and pandemic and beyond. So I think you probably heard enough of pandemic, especially after that, there's the Delta variant, and God knows what's after that. This is the course description, learning objectives. We are in pandemic, right? But according to United Nations 2019, pandemic is only the 3rd thing out of the 10 things gonna derail us in terms of health. So this is not even the worst yet. The 2nd, chronic diseases. The 1st one, climate change. So there are stuffs out there that can derail our future that we as in maybe ASHRAE need to address that. So who's going to be the watchtower to see these things coming and come up with measures to minimize their impact, right? Because pandemic hit us, all of a sudden we set up, let's set up the epidemic task force because we're not ready for that one coming. So what are we going to do about those? Now, I would suggest to you that if the pandemic happened in 1950, it's not as bad as today. Why is that? Because at that time, the world has 2.6 billion people. Above 60 years old is only 8%. In fact, the average American at that time lived about 60-some years old. Life expectancy compared to today is in the 70s. 2020, 7.8 billion people. What percent of the people above 60 years old? The profile is changing. People live longer. Today we are 78 average years old life expectancy. The percentage of people above 60 is 13%. When pandemic hit us, which group got the worst? The older people, the people above 60. Fast forward, the year is 2070, 9.4 billion people. What percent of the people live above 60 years old? Was that? He's pretty good. No wonder he's sitting in front. So 28%. If you think today pandemic hit us, stress out our healthcare facility, just wait till 2070 when we have 28% of the people is about 60 years old. And by the way, why is that? Partially it's because this is male and female, the amount of money we spend on them in terms of their diseases. The different shades of blue really is chronic diseases, right? The stuff that you won't die, but you're gonna live with it for a long, long time. And that's where 60 years old line draw. So if you think the healthcare cost is bad today, and if you think the pandemic is bad today, just wait. So let's say we are roughly 80 years old life expectancy. If we as a nation just extend our life expectancy into 85 years old, is it possible? Well, from 1950 to 60s, today, we increase from 65 to 78. So it's entirely possible. But the healthcare costs will roughly increase in 3 times. Now, this is regression of all the countries in the world. So it's not just us, it's where the world is going. May I suggest to you that ASHRAE and all of us really part of ASHRAE, we have a chance to make a difference in this world in terms of minimizing the healthcare cost impact. And when the next pandemic, chronic disease, global climate change, whatever they are hit us, we should be more ready for it. It is us in ASHRAE that should step up to do that. And we are. So if you look at the strategic plan of ASHRAE, we are addressing moving from indoor air quality to indoor environmental quality. 4 things specially address air quality, thermal comfort, visual, and acoustic. Now, rather than look at these 4 dimensions discussed in ASHRAE, I'm going to go back to human beings. What exactly is a human? And how to make them healthy, like both you and me. So let's focus on human being. Now, there are 10 different systems inside a human being. Today, we'll focus on 5, given the time we have. The first one is obviously the respiratory system, the way we breathe. What's in the air? No matter climate change, the India, the Chinese, the PM 2.5 in the sky, the wildfire, some of these elements from climate change has something they gave off to the air. PM 2.5, that's where the PM 2.5 micron and below penetrate deep into the breathing system. But then there's stuff that are visible above 10 micron, and then the stuff that not visible below 10 micron. So there are tobacco smoke, what is in the air. There are, what is it, pollen, bacteria, viruses, combustion material, the wildfire. But the good news here is MER13 can be a starting point to mitigate a lot of that element, no matter it's for climate change, chronic disease, or pandemic, right? So by now, we probably figured that out already, right? I mean, you probably heard enough about MER13 filter in your life, but not gas, right? Carbon dioxide, gas molecule, way too small, you need carbon filter to deal with that. So MER13 filter is important. You don't necessarily need 100% outside air, especially for COVID. This is from the Epidemic Task Force website, because MER13 filter, one pass, will eliminate roughly 89% of the virus, SARS-CoV-2 in specific in the air, one pass. So 100% outside air, if the ambient is good, great, you got clean air. But The first time you pass a MERV 13, 89% clean. The second time you pass it, out of that left over 11%, 89% of the air will clean again. So pretty soon, if you have MERV 13 filter, you recycle it a few times, you can approach 100% outside air, right? So MERV 13 filter will be a good start for recirculation. You probably learned about or heard about the rule of 1,000. What is the rule of 1,000? Anytime you release a contaminant outdoor, you have 1,000 times less likely to breathe that stuff in compared to indoor. So there are more push towards some space we can build outdoor. Or building like this one we did, it has both natural ventilation and also MERV 13 filter. And by the way, free air change doesn't have to be outdoor air. It could be free air change of quote unquote equivalent outdoor air, which is your filter or your UV light, right? UV light, filter, outside air combined equivalent to free air change of outside air. It will eliminate 95% of the contaminant inside space. But bacteria is not all that bad. Some bacteria may be helpful. In this case, University of Oregon, you probably might have seen this before, is that mechanical system, very little diversity in microbial, but a lot more pathogen indoor. Outdoor, the rule of 1,000, right? It has much more diversity in microbial, as a result, much less pathogen, versus if you have operable window, you're in between. So not necessarily all microbial are bad. There are some maybe actually helpful to us. Well, at the end of the day, we are actually make up mostly microbial. Probably you have more microbial on your body right now that are not belong to you, but keeping you healthy. That's why New York University study indicate that when they compare the built environment versus the village, they said, we think the disturbance of the microbial is one of the causes for what? For chronic diseases. Number 2 in the chart we start. Stay there and think about it. Think about this group of people, the Amish people. In this case, they study the Amish people. U of Chicago studied. That's why I brought it up. It's the relevant to Midwest. So they study they study the Amish people close to the livestock versus the Amish people far away from the livestock. And what they find out is growing up, in this case, is the children. The children who live close to the livestock, when they grew up, they have stronger immune system. So maybe we'll spray this stuff in the air. By the way, this is not a recommendation from ASHRAE. Much needed science are not there yet, so don't go out and buy this stuff and start spraying everywhere indoor. But some people suggest that. Or in one of our buildings, what we designed was we work with microbiologists and have different plants and use the stack effect to draw part of this microbial inside the building to increase the diversity of the microbial when it's possible outdoor. So you look around the world, where I'm going is it possible that healthy air is not one size fits all? Is it possible when you grow up, maybe exposed to a diverse of microbial will improve your immune system? Now, when you grow very old, I don't know whether you want to completely expose yourself to a lot of microbial. That might be a different story. But is it one size fits all? Now, what we did here is we study actually 18 countries, different air quality standard. By the way, all this information, if you want, we can share with you. It's our company's work, but happy to share with you to basically, we can learn from each other. So what did we learn from here? At least there's one country, the green highlighted here. The air quality has something to do with who you are. If you are children, if you are pregnant, if you are older, they require a higher level of air quality because you are more vulnerable. We know that from the pandemic, right? Look at the people from the nursing home. Shouldn't they breathe healthier air than we do because they're more vulnerable? We talk about equity. How about equity to the older people who need help? Because that's what you're facing. We worry about coming back to the office. This is a study of Michigan, basically saying the outbreaks is actually not that significant compared to nursing home, which you see right up there. So who are the vulnerable people that need help? And remember, it's not completely for them, it's a win-win, because if we minimize the cost, they're gonna get sick, it helps us too. That projection of healthcare costs about 60 years old. Enough about air. Let's talk about thermal comfort a little bit. So within a thermal comfort zone from pandemic, we also learned, you probably used this calculator from the Homeland Security before. Inside a comfort zone in this case is kind of a winter, 70 degree Fahrenheit, 40% RH. The virus of 90% decay time is about 200 minutes. But if I just start changing that temperature from 70 to 78 degree dry bulb without changing the wet bulb, I actually reduce the virus 90% decay time to about 130 some minutes. So inside the comfort zone we have, it has different parameters that can impact the microbial survival. You probably saw enough about the relative humidity, 40 to 60%, and knowing that in places like Chicago or Milwaukee, 40% indoor in an office building is obviously a little bit difficult. But the idea that relative humidity impact the survival time of microbial, the droplet, how far, because the humidity, if it's higher, the droplet tend to drop faster. There are more stuff in the air for the droplet to adhere to drop out of the air. And also relative humidity can improve your immune system, right? Because it accelerates the movement of the cilia inside your breathing system. But it's not just all thermal comfort when it comes to our skin. Part of that is sunlight. And it's an equitable issue too, because a lot of the African-American, Hispanic people, working class people, they have to work indoor during the daytime. They don't get exposure to sunlight. And some of that is, they ask for it, like my daughter, spend all the time indoor on the iPhone every day, on the bed, inside the room, never go out. So she asked for it. She's vitamin D deficient. But maybe we can design our building to encourage people to go outside. This is a building in Chicago, 330 North Green. The idea is to create a south porch so that people during lunchtime or whenever they have a break, they can go outside to have a dose of sunlight. 15 minutes during the midday, that's all you need, at least as an anchoring point of your circadian rhythm and a dose of sunlight for vitamin D. So it's about your skin. Moving on, the third system, your nervous system and your brain. Also part of the ASHRAE address, so far we look at what ASHRAE address, the air, the thermal comfort. Now is what you see, the light. We know a lot more about what's the appropriate lighting level, the glare, 10:1 ratio between bright and dark spot, and how we use shading devices to control that glare. And with all the computer now, might have showed you before, this is one of the projects we are doing, study of different themes, over 600 of them, using cloud computing to study every single hour its daylighting performance and energy performance to figure out what is that combination. The shading, how we end up, and how we impact the architecture, the way it looks. There's a refinement in the facade, but it's actually functional. And also the the artificial light, about LED light and the 350 lux, all those stuff we know. But maybe more interesting is not just the quantity of light. What are we seeing? I really enjoy your office. I wish I have a seat like looking at that position right now. So looking at this picture on the screen is going to be very different than this one. Why is that? Because this is what's happening in your brain. Immediately increase blood flow to your brain. Why is that? Because you were, okay, is this thing going to hurt me? Just basic instinct, right? So you look at this thing, you don't understand it, immediately their blood flow to your brain and start stressing you out, try to figure out what is this thing? Will it hurt me? Will it harm me? What is it? Very different than soft fascination of nature, which oftentimes when you look at it, it relaxes you, especially your brain. And as a result, the first thing it brings is an improvement in cognitive performance, especially in your memory. So maybe looking at that is really very different than looking at this. How do we quantify the benefit? So for your interest, if you're interested in it, ASHRAE actually has a direction of trying to quantify some of the benefit of indoor environmental quality. So if you are interested in that, we can work together. Professor Bill Banfleth in the Environmental Health Committee is heading that. So if you guys are interested, we can work together to try to figure out, form teams to address that. Again, how ASHRAE will become leader in this environment so that we can help the future generation to be healthier, save some money. So when I retire, my kids can still take care after me and without going bankrupting the nation. It's not just, remember the fourth thing about ASHRAE, air, thermal, what we see, what we hear. Now, I think by now we know a lot about the NC level in the space, especially this office has a really low NC level. And also maybe what are the noises that are more interrupting to us? For example, human conversation centered on built environment is saying it's one of the most annoying things when you hear it, because like a lot of the noises are background noises, but human conversation tend to kind of distract you. But what type of quality of sound can actually help us? What you just heard is probably a little annoying because it is the traffic noise. When you just listen to it, it might have stressed you out a little bit, right? Compared to this one, it just may help you to go to sleep after your nice lunch, much more relaxing. Again, how do we quantify this different quality of sound to make it, to be helpful to the architects and the community to understand what do human beings react to the holistic environment? In our brain, so all these things we are seeing and hearing is our senses. But what is more interesting, one step deeper, is our biomarkers. Can we measure our biomarkers to control the indoor environment? You're probably thinking, what are you talking about? So let's give you an example. Now, this is a research indicating that ionizer, though it can potentially reduce the number of particles in the air, it also in this study indicate it increases the heartbeat variability of the school age children. So that means if we measure the biomarker of the school age children, we would have known that there's something in the air that trigger that potentially, right? So There are actually 250 biomarkers in human body can potentially tell us what the environment is like. Not unlike the animal, they know a storm is coming, not because they have like this amazing like connection with whatever. It's simply because potentially it's the negative or positive ion in the air trigger their biomarkers that they know is coming. So beyond the ASHRAE parameters, maybe this is out of the scope of the ASHRAE, but that's actually a question we want to think about. What is the scope of ASHRAE? Where do we limit ourselves? Should we go beyond into the hormones? If you look at the human beings' circadian rhythm in terms of their hormones, you have more blood flow to your brain when you're sleeping than you are awake. So no wonder my dream is so amazing in the nighttime, you know. And obviously, you are more melatonin to trigger you to sleep. And you generate more hormone when you're sleeping than you are awake. And also your growth. I have a child, like 13 years old baseball player. And you know what did he do? He go to sleep early. Every night, 10, 11, he said, I got to go to sleep. And why is that? It's because I got to trigger the growth hormone. I need to bulk up and become a big guy to hit the baseball. So that's what he's thinking. So how do we address the circadian rhythm of a building in terms of hormone, in terms of rest, comfort? What temperature is appropriate to generate those hormones? In what environment? Some suggest much cooler temperature when you sleep. How about the diurnal cycle of the CO2 and impact to human? A lot of questions we don't understand in terms of circadian rhythm, but should we end ASHRAE's involvement just onto those 4 dimensions, or more holistically about how the indoor environment can impact our hormone generation, and as a result, we as a human being, whether we are healthier or not? Muscular system, 7,000 steps a day, decrease your mortality rate. I don't know about you, during pandemic, I gained 10 pounds and I didn't eat in the last few days. I lost like 3 pounds just so that I, look better in front of like the camera here. But, we are not working as hard now during the pandemic. So we designed buildings like this new school in New York to emphasize the walking part of it. And we dream about city like Chicago. During the pandemic, there's nobody on Michigan Avenue. Maybe we can have like that, just a little bit more bike. So I'm gonna stop on the human dimension because I could go on the other systems in human, but I wanna stop there to touch on the other 2 topics, the built environment lightly, and finally, being in the Midwest, our terrestrial environment. So let's touch on the built environment. 4 things I want to talk about. The first thing is the incorporation of nature with global warming or climate change coming. We see elevate of the extreme temperature, where that usually will trigger more mortality. So have more green plants, not only reduce the mean radiant temperature. When you think about mean radiant temperature inside a space, but there's mean radiant temperature or UTCI outside, that if you have more plants, it can lower the UTCI of the space. The second thing, the flexibility office, the flexibility workspace. We know that the relationship between density and the risk of COVID is roughly linear, meaning that if you decrease 50% of the people in the space, you roughly decrease the risk of infection by 50%. So we're gonna start thinking about how do we control risk, right? During COVID time or after COVID time, different spaces has different risk level, right? We worry, oh my God, that elevator, I'm gonna walk in there, I'm gonna come out with COVID. Well, actually in high-rise elevator, if you turn on the exhaust fan, there are 72 air changers, 72 air changers. How much do you have in an office building, VAV during summer? 6, 8? I mean, how much do you have in the winter? Well, how much do you have in a dedicated outdoor system, air change, right? So in an elevator, within that 2 minutes ride, that's roughly what you take to go even up to the Willis Tower. I don't think you'll get sick if everybody's wearing masks. So the risk level is lower. Obviously, different spaces have different risk level. How often as professional, we start calculating the risk level of different space as part of the deliverables? Some suggest use ionizer inside an elevator. Well, it takes 5.5 minutes for 90% decay. You're gone already, right? You're not gonna stay there for 5 minutes unless you have elevator misfunction, right? Then you're gonna be there for a while. The risk of an elevator getting infected with pus is 0.0005%. It's actually quite low. So you don't have to completely worry about the elevator, the risk level is low. So the third element in the built environment is the material, the healthy material. What we find is, it's interesting. Those frequent touch surface, let's like wipe it clean and everything. Where do you find the most elements in an indoor environment is actually the floor, right? And it makes sense because during COVID-19, it's the droplets. When people talk, it drop onto the floor. So you shouldn't be surprised to find out there are a lot of elements on the floor, but not even more than the frequent touch area. So if you have dogs and cats and babies and whoever like yoga or something, they crawl on the floor. Okay, they'll get that. It's a little trickier, but you get the idea. So the surfaces matter. And then the third environment, the measure space, that's probably no surprise by now. You see all those devices that measure the amount of people in the toilet and give you an indicator light and all that stuff. Not to mention air quality and you probably have a few companies talk to you about that, right? The PM 2.5 level and all that good stuff. This is a building we did. Sometimes the air quality level can be a way to show off in this building. It's actually a 300-meter tall tower in Guangzhou. They actually display their air quality on the facade of the building to showcase they are good. Maybe only in China, because here I could just see the lawyer saying, what are you trying to do again, Finally, I want to touch something that maybe beyond the scope of ASHRAE, but since we are all in Midwest, we should think about that. This is the world about 8,000 BC, a lot of green, forests. How's the world look like today? No, this is the world 8,000 BC. This is the world today. What are those pink, reddish things? Those are farmlands, which we know since we are from Midwest. How is that impact the air quality of the earth by just doing that sort of thing? So what you're seeing now is roughly before the Industrial Revolution to now, we are seeing a decrease in bio-based origin of aerosols. A lot of them could be bio-based material. Now we remember, like way back when we talk about the diversity of microbial is one of the issues that make people a little bit healthier with the diverse of microbial. We actually decrease a lot of that microbial in the air because we cut down a lot of trees. But what increased in the air, especially in Midwest, is the release of the nitrogen from the soil because we chop down the trees and have acres and acres and miles of farmland. If you are like me, drive down to downstate Illinois for my son's baseball games, which seems to be just everywhere else other than Chicago, you will be driving through miles and miles of those cornfield or farmland. And oftentimes they are not regenerative farm, meaning that only 5% of the farms in US are regenerative. 95% of them are not regenerative and expose the soil. And as a result, the loss of nitrogen in the air and fertilizer. And that's why we keep on pouring this fertilizer to the soil to make it fertile again in Midwest, because we don't practice regenerative farming. Architects and engineers can change that. We specify woods that come from sustainable forests. Why don't we specify material that come from regenerative farm? I know not that many people say that. They may not heard it from a lot of people, but that may be one of the steps we need to do to right some of the maybe wrongs we did in the past. Because if we didn't do that, it impacts our geosphere, our Earth in Midwest. The release of nitrogen, now we are having a lot more nitrogen in you and me, 40% is from fertilizer. At one time, Midwest is full of bison. They compact the soil and put the nitrogen back and make them fertile. But now we don't have that. The fertilizer actually go into the Gulf of Mexico and create that zone. What is that zone? You put one of those states, put it there. It's roughly about that big. This is what a dead zone is. So it's about 7,000 square miles, Gulf of Mexico flowing from Mississippi, Midwest Basin, and it's increasing in recent years. And it's basically the fertilizer we put in there, the phosphate and the nitrogen got run off into the river and flow into the Gulf of Mexico and create this hypoxia, thinning of oxygen and killing a lot of the marine life. Now with the season changes, the hypoxia phenomenon change and the life come back again. So maybe we can think about indoor vegetation or regenerative farm, specified product that's come from regenerative farming. Finally, I want to touch on one point is, how do we know some of this stuff may work, some of them more alignment with nature? Look at the Amish people. We heard about their children, right? Their children are healthier. Well, what about their adults? First of all, you got to get the same haircut. That might be the key. So let's do it. But beyond the haircut, the Amish people has much less cancer rate, almost no obesity, chronic disease, one of them is obesity, cancer, chronic disease. 5% of the kids have asthma compared to almost 2 times of that in America in average. And 3 cases of autism in this study compared to a lot more in the typical American generation, less allergies too, which translated to big dollar signs. So maybe our future built environment involve thinking about the human to start with, human-centric, and then the environment we are in, the built environment and the outdoor, the rule of 1,000. And then beyond that, to think about this terrestrial through the day and night season, annual cycle to create a community that not only is not just operating carbon, but whole life carbon zero as we move into 2050. By now it's actually 2040 in order to maintain 1.5 degrees C, to create this carbon neutral, healthy world, and where human and nature can finally thrive together, not just on energy, not just on carbon, but holistically create a better world. And ASHRAE, by focusing on the indoor environmental health and maybe other elements, we can certainly help to be one of the leaders to push this agenda forward to create a better world. Thank you. Let's have some question and discussion. I don't know whether we have time. Do we have time for that? Just like that. Okay. What item specifically? Sorry. So this is very rich questions. I think there's one thing is fundamental health. So the forming of the Environmental Health Committee, by the way, I'm actually not the incoming chair, I'm chairing right now. So, But it's the first step to that. Create this watchtower, which is what environmental health committee is supposed to be, a watchtower to look out for the things that's going to hit us. So that has been in the ASHRAE sort of long-term thing. The strategic plan, think about the next 4 years, will focus on indoor environmental health. So there are these pieces out there specifically to pandemic. We are actually thinking about what are the pandemic learning lessons we can incorporate into our course. And we should have a dialogue, because one of the dialogue is, should ASHRAE create like a 90.1 parallel in energy, but health? What do you think? Why not, right? Yes, yeah. Yeah, so that will be definitely a question that we can discuss further on the topic of ionization. There's plenty of discussion, trust me, about that on that topic. I think the overall arching thing is they are emerging technology that we thought it will be more helpful to have more data on it, and we can share some of the data with you on that subsequent to this discussion here. But yeah, what are the emerging technology that will be helpful? Sure. Go ahead. So that's actually a really loaded question too. High velocity system in general has a possibility of resurface the element on the ground. And as we talked before, there are a lot of elements on the ground. Having said that, the current guideline is actually is focused a lot more on the mixed system as a preferred way, especially if they can go through a filter environment. So that's kind of the base recommendation, is to prefer to have mix. And when the air mix, it minimizes the infection of any hotspot and go through a filter. Once you go through a filter, even MER13, as you saw the numbers, I don't have to repeat it. So that's kind of the base recommendation. But in terms of high velocity system, there are specific cases that are very clear. It's the Korean restaurant that some of you might have seen. The infected person is actually over 6 meters away from another desk because of the diffuser velocity was so high that it transfer all the virus and get the person infected. So there are definitely concern about the high velocity system, especially the direction of flow. And also, obviously, there are resuspension of the floor. But the basic guideline right now is focused, but it's a little tricky too, because depending on some of the velocity, and we are working on a paper that I'll share with you in the wintertime, is about that. It's about airflow direction using CFD and how that can potentially impact the risk of the space. So at the end of the day, if you have high velocity system, yes, you really need to look at that maybe in a CFD sort of study to understand the holistic risk increase in the space, because potentially you can do that. Sorry for the long long answer to the question. Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. Actually, if you want to dive deeper into that topic, you can, depending on whether you want to work with the health team or I'm focused more on the commercial. If you want to work with us, you can just email me and we can try to form like a meeting or two to try to brainstorm ideas like that. And we are working on a paper right now. It's exactly that topic is the velocity and because the current epidemic task force guidelines doesn't really address the airflow pattern. So we'll start addressing that through some of the CFD study we did. Hopefully we can work together on some of this.
I want to just say, before we have people start dropping off on the Zoom here, if people can make sure to fill out the DL evaluation. So there's some on the tables and then the link is also in the chat. And if you do need proof of attendance, I saw that mentioned in the chat here. You can email Haley and she's going to put her, if she didn't do it already, she's going to put her email in the chat there. Couple of questions in the chat here.
I think that's an insightful question. I can tell you what Environmental Health Committee is doing. Environmental Health Committee actually invited global experts in different fields to start looking at these problems holistically. So yes, we are working with some of the global architecture, interior, and microbial expert. We just draft up a document called as Increasing Dogs Population in the Space. And that document actually worked with microbial expert, architects, and developer to understand what's the impact of having more dogs in a space. Now, it may sound funny, but Amazon headquarters in Seattle has 1,000 dogs. Well, what's the sensible heat gain and latent heat gain of a dog? How much smell how much odor they generate? Well, how do you keep the dogs healthy? How much oxygen do they use? So there's a whole holistic of that, and we are working with different experts to resolve that. So that may be one dimension we can think about is how do we engage global experts to work with ASHRAE to solve some of these issues? Oh, is there, I cannot really read here. Is there other questions then? Okay.
We can kind of close up if there aren't any more questions. Stick around for a little bit if anybody's interested in chatting. And thanks everybody for attending virtually and in person. Don't forget our next technical session next month.
Thank you for the invitation.
I guess,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a lead.
It's a one credit thing, yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Is there a way, well, if you can share can you share the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
So then I would at least have that documentation.
Yeah.
For my lead credit.
Sure.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Second, how can I get involved with the environmental health?
The environmental health committee. Now that we are I need to figure out how to work. Now that we are online, because the meeting is open to everybody. How about if you send me an email, I will let you know when we're gonna meet. You can join and start seeing whether you want to be part of the participant. The committee itself is appointed by the ASHRAE president. So, but like we invite other people to feel free to join the conversation. So we can invite you in there, and then if you are truly interested, we can try to see if there's way we can get you to be part of the organization.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Can I write down your email?
Luke, Luke, .liang, Leung, at ashray.com, at som.com, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, happy to do that. Jason, oh, GK, yeah, wait, I thought you guys, in Chicago.
We have an office, a Wisconsin office.
Oh, okay. I got Dan's email all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you know when he sent me email? Whenever he have somebody that they cannot hire, but they thought it's a good candidate, he's like, Luke, can you look at whether you want to hire this guy? That's where I get a lot of his emails.
Sure. So is that Dan Doyle?
Yeah, Dan Doyle.
Yep. He's one of our, he's on our board.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I know him for a while, and he always email me when they have good candidates that they cannot use.
Sure. No, I respect the respect.
Yeah, no, totally.
I was just at the office yesterday. Cups, pens, we have Wisconsin Healthcare Engineer Association has a 3-day conference.
Yeah.
Give away some swag. Yeah.
Yeah, feel free to contact me. Happy to, if you're interested in this, let's try to find ways to work together.
Yeah, no, this is really good. My son has one lung, so he's high risk. So all of this was very informative.
What happened?
So he was actually next Tuesday, 9 years from next Tuesday, he was born. He was actually born twice. So he was 25 weeks gestation. They found that he had a tumor in the lower lobe. That tumor is called general cystic adenoid.
So this is by birth, he born twice?
Yeah, so he was in the womb, this tumor grew and grew and grew. It was causing hypertension for his heart. My wife at 25 weeks was like 40. He wasn't bringing in the amniotic fluid because the esophagus was pink from the tumor was growing so high. So what they had to do was basically
Do you mind if I just end the meeting here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Expose his entire left side, had his arm out of the womb, so he's pretty much partially exposed. He had a incision from the middle of his back to the middle of his chest, opened him up, and took a tumor the size of the womb. He was this big. The tumor was 3.5 times the size of his head.
Oh, thank God he's survived.
Yes. So they removed the tumor, his heart stopped. They resuscitated him. His heart started beating, he took him back in, stitched my wife back up, and he stayed there for a week, 34, so another